Well, do we have a big show planned tonight? This is going to be um, it's a difficult topic to talk about, but there is a lot of this going on right now in the church. And if you don't spend a lot of time on Twitter, you might not even really be aware that it's happening. And just with the events of the last, I mean, like 24 hours, really, it kind of like pushed me over to the edge of what's going on. And so I thought, I think I really need to address some of this stuff. So that's what I'm gonna lead with. As I've been posting on social media, the topics are how people relate these three things. It should be. We're going to talk about the gospel. We're going to talk about Reformed theology / Calvinism. And we're going to talk about white nationalism and white supremacy / racism. And yeah, you did hear that correctly. There is a lot of this going on. It's hard to ignore. I'm going to lead with that, and then we're going to explain a little bit more why exactly I'm talking about this here in a moment. But that's what the theme is tonight. A couple of aspects of business. First, if this is your first time watching, or if you're listening on the podcast for the first time, thank you so much for joining us. My name is Brad. I am the host. And you can join us every Tuesday night at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time for the live show. We also have some great podcast series coming up that will be separate. They will just be podcasts that I'm trying to do. I'll talk about that in a moment. But a couple of things that I wanted to remind you about. Number one, the Cruciform Conference is coming up, as we talked about with Dr. Benj. He's leading and closing the conference, and then I'll be there on Saturday night to do a live show from the conference. I'm really looking forward to that. Dead Men Ministries, Dead Men Coalition is putting that on, and as you know, we are falling under their umbrella, and we are excited to be teaming up with those guys as well. So if you can make it, please plan on attending to the conference. It's in Indianapolis. It's going to be a great time. Again, Dr. Dustin Benj will be the lead speaker and the closing speaker. He's a former guest of Theology Nights. And then Kofi, our good friend, he also will be a speaker. He was a former guest on the show as well. And speaking of Kofi, as I said, I'm trying to do exclusive podcast content. So if you're like a podcast-only listener, I'm trying to provide you guys your own content. I've been saying it for a while, and I try to do some stuff here and there. But Monday, May 13th, we have big news. Kofi's actually going to join us, and we're going to have a conversation about a new resource that he has on his website. Kofi is a very gifted speaker. He's a very gifted teacher of the Bible. And so when he created this resource, I said to him, I want people to know about it. I want to get the word out about what's going on. And I asked him if he wanted to chat about it. So we're going to chat on a podcast Monday, May 13th. So look for that on probably late Monday night, early Tuesday morning, either way. And then we are also going to talk about, so I'll tie these two together. So if you are on Facebook and if you're a member of the Reformed Library, it's a Facebook group. As you've heard me talk about Dr. Beake's book, Reformed Systematic Theology, I've been trying to get a group of guys together to go through this book, and a guy actually started a Facebook group that I saw today, and so I joined and I posted something about doing a podcast as we work through this book. So if you have Dr. Beake's Reformed Systematic Theology, or if you're in the process of getting it and you're just waiting for it to arrive, look up this Facebook group through Reformed Library. Send a request to join. We're going to work through this book over 21 weeks. There's a schedule. It's going to be a great time, but what we're actually going to do is we're going to do podcasts throughout the entire time. I'm going to do each week, I'm going to do a podcast where we talk about that week's reading. We're going to talk to people that are involved in the group, and Kofi, actually, I messaged him earlier and I said on May 13th, we're going to kind of, maybe he'll be the first one to talk about this. But every week I'm going to have a podcast specifically about this book. I'm going to have somebody on the show that will join us, and we will talk about what they're reading and how God is using this book and what their thoughts are, and we'll talk about theology that we're reading. I'm really looking forward to it. So it's going to be, like I said, 21 weeks long. I don't know the date that it's going to be out. I don't know specifics. We're going to figure that out, but just look for that coming up, probably starting, in the next week or so. It's already going to be here that quickly. So yeah, if you're just now joining again, jump on a Reformed Library on Facebook, one of the Facebook groups, submit a request to join the private group for Dr. Beake's Reformed Systematic Theology. We're going to work through it over the next 21 weeks. I'm going to record podcasts every week about it. We're going to have guests on the show. We're going to have a great time. really looking forward to that. That's very exciting news and just a lot of big things that are going on. I'm excited to do the podcast. So the last thing I want to say too, hey Luke, good to see you. And Caleb is here. There's a lot of people here. John is here. The newest Facebook friend I have, John, and actually he's the one that started this Reformed Library group that I'm talking about. So I'm grateful for him doing that because it was something that I wanted to get up and running, but just didn't really have the time and didn't really, honestly see how we could do it. And so he did it. I'm grateful for him doing that. Caleb is here, my good friend Caleb. Chris, of course, my brother from Australia is here, and TJ and Miss Robbie. Thank you guys all for tuning in. If you're on the website, I can't see you. I don't know that you're there. I just see you're just a number. And if you're listening later on the podcast, I really don't know who you are. You're just literally analytics. But anyways, thank you guys for tuning in. I appreciate you guys joining every Tuesday night and listening to the podcast. And Derek is here. And lastly, another good friend of mine, Derek. I have so many good friends via social media. That's why I'm so grateful for social media because I have so many brothers that I keep in touch with, and I have interacted with so many people. I'm grateful for it. So the last thing I wanted to say, and this will be specifically for Northeast Ohio people, my good friend John Tucker, pastor of Community Bible Church in Beloit, he is hosting a conference at his church May 17th, 18th, and 19th. It is called the Pillars of Faith Bible Conference. He will have two guest speakers, Mike Abendroth and E.D. Burns. And Mike, of course, is the host of No Compromise Radio. I'm sure you're familiar with his stuff. He is a great servant of the Lord, and he provides excellent resources for the church. And Pastor John's a great friend of mine. I've preached at his church a couple of times, and through social media, that's how I met him. We've become really good friends, and I've gotten to know him and his wife really well. So I'd be happy to see a lot of you guys there at the conference. I'm preaching that weekend at a church, so my goal will try to be to go up on Saturday morning. Session times, Friday night, the 17th at 7 p.m., Saturday the 18th from 9 to 12, and then Sunday 9:15 a.m. Sunday school, and then 10:30 a.m. for the worship service. So if you're interested in learning more about that, go to communitybiblechurch.com, I believe is the website. You can find out more information, and you can sign up to attend. We'll be there on Saturday. I look forward to meeting some of you guys there. That's the business stuff. So let's just kind of go over and we'll talk about the outline of what we're going to work through, and I've got some stuff that I'm going to put up on the screen here in a moment. Let me also point out too that I was outside for literally 45 minutes today, maybe an hour, and I have sunburn. Like, I'm just not designed to be outside. Like, I am an inside guy, like just clearly an inside guy. And so today was like in Ohio, on the Youngstown area of Ohio, it was like the first warmest day. I mean, it was like 147 degrees outside, and I'm already ready for winter. Everybody complains about the cold, and I have to just sit there and listen to you guys complain about the cold all winter long. So I'm going to start complaining about the heat right now, and I'm going to complain about the heat all the way through until that first fall afternoon happens. But yeah, so I got sunburn already, and it's just going to be a long summer. I'm going to spend a lot of time in the house, I think. But anyways, so the outline for tonight, again, if you're just joining us, we are discussing a couple main topics around this social justice movement, this white nationalism, white supremacy. We are going to talk about the gospel and Reformed theology and how those things relate and why people are trying to relate those things to racism and white supremacy. But let me set the background for why we're talking about this. Because, as I said, if you don't spend a lot of time on Twitter, because that's the big area where all of this stuff happens, Twitter is just sort of like running rampant with these guys that are, honestly, and I'm just going to call them out, they're trying to get famous off of this social justice movement. It's thankfully, though, it's a topic that I've engaged via Twitter a lot, and I have a lot of people that I trust that have been able to educate me on this topic. So I've received good counsel and I've received good information. It's something that I've had private conversations about. And then after yesterday, I just decided that it was time that I need to mention it myself because of a specific tweet that I'm going to put up on the screen here in a moment from the one and only Beth Moore, who I will mention something about her in a second. But basically what's going on is this big Eva, big evangelical. You know, they're doing these things where they are sweeping with a broad brush. They are just painting this picture that if you are white, you are racist. I was just having a conversation right before I jumped on the show. I was just reading through Twitter and I saw this, and somebody said, if you spend so much time trying to prove that you're not a racist, that just elevates you to a label that you are actually a racist. And I thought to myself, like, we shouldn't have to spend all this time telling people that we're not racist, but we do, because everybody is assuming that if you are white and if you're a Calvinist / Reformed theology guy, you are racist, even though you're not. And so we've gotten to this point now to where we actually have to defend ourselves because people are assuming that we're racist just because we're white or just because we adhere to Calvinism. It's crazy, but it unfortunately is true. And I'm just tired, really, what happened yesterday, and I'm going to get to that in a moment. But I'm tired of faithful believers. I'm tired of these big name guys that I look up to, that I have learned from, that have mentored me via social media and through YouTube and stuff like that, and through their writings. I'm tired of them being called out left and right. I'm tired of they're just getting blasted all the time. And so what happened yesterday sort of set me over the edge. So to begin our conversation, we're going to talk about Beth Moore first, because she was the one that first started all of this. Okay. Now let me go into this sort of delicately, and I want to preface what's going on here with a statement. But the problem that I have with this statement is the assumption that is being made. We have to look at what this tweet really is trying to say here. Okay. I have a problem with Beth Moore. I hate to just like come out and say it, but I really do. I just like I have a lot of problems with Beth Moore. She's got such an influence on women in the church, and it breaks my heart. It really does, because she's got such an influence and she's got such a following, and she's somebody that needs to be avoided, plain and simple. Not just because of what I'm about to show you, but because of her teaching. She teaches in error. She's not a solid teacher. And there's so many faithful women that, you know, I feel bad. Like, I've had conversations with my wife before. Hey, it's good to see you, Lauren. Thank you. And I appreciate your shout out too, by the way, on Twitter the other day. And who else just came in? And Nick is one of my, okay, so I'm going to get way off topic tonight. I already know it. And I'm going to end up talking for like 2 hours. Lauren, thank you for the shout out. It was very honoring to be included with that group of people. But Nick, Christ is the Cure. Listen, I am obsessed, and I'll use that word, with his podcast and his Instagram page. I absolutely love it. Just found it a couple of weeks ago, connected with him, sent him some messages and stuff like that. Christ is the Cure on Instagram. Subscribe to them on your podcast apps. They're fantastic. They really are. And I mean that. And I'm not just saying that because he just popped in, but I wanted to give you guys a shout out real quick. So let me just click over and I'm going to show you the Beth Moore tweet that I Sorry about that. I didn't set my mic up. I always forget to do something. I'm sorry. If you're if you're on the show, you're gonna get caught up in a second. Hold on. I'm sorry. But anyways, I have conversations with my wife about this issue that she runs into, that there's not a solid female teacher that is getting a lot of not a lot of recognition, because there is these names like Beth Moore are the ones that are becoming so popular, and now I can't actually like I'm gonna have to click over. Give me a second. Let me fix this real quick. Okay, we should be good now. Okay, so I clicked over. We should be good. Give it a second. I apologize about that. Podcast people, you have no idea what's going on, but I forgot to add my mic to one of my screens, and so it kind of lost audio for a second. So anyways, here we go. So what I have up on the screen right now is this tweet that started this entire conversation that we're actually having right now. So what happens is Beth Moore, she says, there are simply no gospel grounds for defending white supremacy. None. This isn't theological rocket science. The Savior of the world gave himself on the cross for our sins to deliver us from the present evil age, according to the will of our God and Father, wearing a brown body. Now that's the key. The issue that I have with this statement, first off, let's walk through what my main issue is. First off, there's nobody using the gospel as grounds to define white supremacy. Like, it's not happening, okay? And so the blanket statement that is made by Beth Moore when she says there's no grounds for defending the white supremacy that's going on right now. Here's the issue that I take with that statement, okay? Beth Moore has, the last time I checked, 892,000 followers on Twitter. 892,000, okay? That's just her platform on social media. Just Twitter, not even social media as a whole. Just Twitter. So she tweets this out and she says, there's simply no gospel grounds for defending white supremacy. Like, yeah, no, are you serious? Like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that. Like, I didn't realize that you couldn't be a racist and also believe in the gospel. Like, I didn't realize that. So the issue that I have, though, is she's got 892,000 followers on social media. She's got Lifeway has all of her Bible studies. I mean, have you ever been in a Lifeway and walked around to the Beth Moore section? I mean, it's a Beth Moore section. Like, she's got Bible studies everywhere. So she's got that platform. She also does conferences and public speaking and stuff like that. So her influence is in the millions, like plain and simple. She has millions of people that listen or read or watch her. So she makes a statement like, there are simply no gospel grounds for defending white supremacy. What do you think the first thing that happens is when that goes out? People say, oh my gosh, did you know this? Did you know that there's believers who are using the gospel as grounds for white supremacy? Like, slowly just read that statement. There are no gospel grounds for white supremacy, for defending white supremacy. There's no gospel grounds to do this. These large, broad brush statements is unfortunately not new. They are happening by big names all throughout Christianity. It's becoming popular. If you read through some of these social media posts from people, if you read through TGC and the articles that they post, IVP, International Varsity Press, they released a book titled, Can White People Be Saved? And I'm not paraphrasing. That's the exact title of the book. Can White People Be Saved? There is a huge movement of this social justice stuff going on. This agenda is spreading, okay? And it has now, honestly, and I've seen enough of it to know that this is going on. People are more concerned with promoting a social justice agenda, racism and white supremacy, and if you're a Republican, you sold your soul out, like Matt Chandler said about all the people that voted for Trump, that they sold their soul and they got scared and all that stuff. And if you want to watch it, he did an interview with Vice on HBO where he said those exact things. I'm not paraphrasing at all. Like, you can watch the video. But there's been this movement that this agenda is being put out by so many big name people in the evangelical world. We see statements like this where it says there's no gospel grounds for defending white supremacy. Like, obviously there's not. And then what we have is this. There's this guy, his name is Bradley Mason. He is one of these guys that is riding this fame, trying to get his 5 minutes of social justice warrior. Like, people know who he is, and he says controversial stuff so he can like get people to know who he is, and he's just who he is. So the other day, this is the second tweet. This was it last night? Yeah, yesterday. Bradley Mason says, now this is after, so follow me along here for a moment. Justin Peters, who is an amazing man of God, he tweeted Beth Moore about what she said about the white supremacy gospel. Justin Peters, asked Beth Moore, who is doing this exactly? Who is defending white supremacy using the gospel? And he says it, because we're going to talk about this in a second. Aside from a handful of wingnuts who are not connected to a true biblical church, who is doing this? I asked the same question. Numerous people asked this question. We've asked this question to numerous people on many, many, many times before, okay? We have asked them to provide names of who these people are. Nobody has ever done it. Not once has there ever been an exact example of one of these things happening. But Bradley Mason says, in response to Justin Peters asking Beth Moore for names, okay? So that's the stage, all right? Now get ready. This is just... He says, I'm late to this, but I'll play. So if you want names off the top of my head, he says you, in all capital letters, referring to Justin Peters, John MacArthur, James White, Phil Johnson, Doug Wilson, Jordan Hall, Josh Boyce, Tom Askell, and every other public figure who has made a cottage industry out of fighting social justice. Then he has in there. I tweeted him. I said, can you imagine how much that you have to dislike somebody who disagrees with you that much to call them a white supremacist? Because that's exactly what he did. He pulled out these people that he does not agree with theologically. He honestly hates James White. And Dr. White is one of the most influential people right now in Christianity. John MacArthur. Phil John, I mean, these names, these are solid believers. I don't even care if you disagree with their theology, because I know a lot of people disagree with John MacArthur's theology. They don't lean that way. And there's people that disagree with Phil Johnson, and there's people that disagree with James White. That's fine. Disagree with them if you want to, but I guarantee you don't disagree with them enough that you would call them a white supremacist. I mean, how in the world do you arrive at that conclusion? Because these are the people that you disagree with, therefore they're white supremacists. Unfortunately, this guy is trying to get his 5 minutes of fame. That's what he's doing. And so you put a tweet out there like this, and obviously, I mean, he's got like 1,100 responses on it. So people notice it, and that's what he's trying to do. He's stirring the pot. All of these guys do. All they ever try to do is outdo one another. Who can say something that's so controversial that I'm going to get my moment in the sun? And it's now, I mean, Mason is, Dr. White talks about him. Mason slanders dudes up and down, left and right, but if you call one of these guys out, oh man, it's the end of the world. I mean, if we were to write a tweet like this, calling out people that are these social justice warriors, these guys would flip out. I mean, they would absolutely lose their minds. But yet, it's okay for them to call out faithful brothers. Think about it this way for a moment. These guys aren't interested in biblical unity, and this is why. Okay. He, like all of these other people, they just simply want to call other people out for trying to get their 5 minutes of fame. They make these broad, sweeping statements. They paint with this huge brush. They say, if you hit this mark and you're white, you're automatically a white supremacist. It's got to be. It has to be. What's happening, though, is why, if you really believed, okay, if these guys that I just listed, if they were actually white supremacists, okay, the craziness of that statement that John MacArthur is a white supremacist, okay, but play along for a moment, and if it actually was true, if there was somebody that was on this list that was a white supremacist, why isn't Bradley Mason? Why isn't Beth Moore? Why aren't all of these people? Why aren't their hearts breaking for these guys and saying, listen, let me teach you about the true gospel? Because the true gospel is what unifies us in the church. Why wouldn't you do that if they were, in fact, actually white supremacists? You know why it's not happening? Because they're not white supremacists. It's plain and simple. Why, Beth Moore, if you were really interested in stopping people from using the gospel as a means to promote white nationalism, why not talk to these people directly? Why can't you say this person who is a known figure in the church is using the gospel as a defense of their white nationalism? Because it's not happening. Listen, there are people who think, now that's key, there are people who think they understand the gospel that are promoting a white supremacist agenda. Absolutely. And I am certainly not saying that there are not white supremacist people out there that would claim to be a follower of Christ. I'm not saying that there's somebody who claims to be a follower of Christ that isn't racist. I'm not trying to say that these things don't exist, okay? What I am trying to say, though, is you can't be a true follower of Christ and understand the biblical gospel fully and completely and be a racist. You can't. It's impossible to do that, okay? So with these big, broad statements, why not try to have a more intentional conversation with people? Why? Why not, if it's happening so much, because like these people seem to think that it is happening so much, why not call them out? Why not try to have a conversation about it? Why instead say, off the top of my head, and list all of these guys who everybody knows they're not white supremacists, they're not racist? It's not doing their mission is to destroy racism in the church, which is a great mission, because if there actually is sort of racism happening somewhere, you need to destroy that. If you are a white person and you think too highly of yourself and you look down upon other people, like, you need to be confronted about that because you, A, don't have a right understanding of the gospel. But these broad statements that are being thrown around among well-known people, like well-known people who have a platform, who have an influence, they are making statements like what we just saw here. And let me show you this last one, and then we will, the only thing we're talking about tonight is this. This guy, a lot of you guys might not have heard of him. His name's Dr. Anthony Bradley. So he's got a PhD, so he's definitely smarter than I am, and I don't mean that condescendingly. He's a well-known guy on Twitter. He's got thousands and thousands of followers, like all these other people. And this was the last thing that brought me to the point to where we're having this conversation right now. Let me click over and show you the tweet that he said. He says, it's actually the absence of what's never said. When white nationalism is never regularly condemned in a culture where you know it exists, example, white Calvinism, the gospel never pricks the conscience on issues like that. In a culture where you know it exists, white Calvinism. Okay. Do you see what just happened here? He combined white nationalism with a white person who is a Calvinist. There is not any doubt in his mind. Like, he's not saying, well, it probably doesn't happen everywhere. He is saying, if you are a white person and you are also a Calvinist, you are suffering from white nationalism. That's this guy's agenda, is to bash people up and down and make these broad statements. And listen, I'm white, okay? I'm a Calvinist. And there is not a drop of white nationalism in me. There is not a drop of white supremacy in me. There is not a drop of racism in me at all. And you know why? It's because I understand the gospel. I have a firm foundation in the gospel and the finished work in Christ, that he tore down the wall of hostility between Jew and Greek. He brought us together. Therefore, all of us are under the headship of Christ. We're not separate. We are all together. But when somebody tells me that because I am a white Calvinist, that he then goes on, and I'm not going to share the rest of the conversation. He then goes on to tell me that I'm ignorant because I basically told him, like, listen, I'm a white Calvinist. I don't have bone of race in me at all. I don't have any white supremacy, white nationalism, anything in me. The white Calvinists that I know and I associate with, they're the same way. They're not racist either. And he basically told me I'm ignorant. He told me that he sent me a link to a book that was $900 on Amazon, mind you. And I did do some work. He told me that. I said to him, I don't have $900 to spend on a book, so I guess I'm going to have to remain ignorant. And then he replied with, well, if you knew how to use the library, or if you knew how to use the interloan system between schools and stuff like that, you could get the book. But since you're just choosing to remain ignorant, I guess that's what's going to happen. Like that's really what happens, man. I take offense at that. I really do. I take offense that a guy like Dr. James White, who is a gift to the church, has to spend his time talking about a guy like Bradley Mason, because Bradley Mason calls out all these guys on Twitter on a public platform. He has to spend his time doing that instead of doing textual criticism and studies of the original language and teaching us to exegete text and stuff like that. I have a problem with it. We're wasting time. And why do I bring this up? I think because we all need to be aware of what's going on right now. This stuff's creeping in, man. It's bad. It really is. There's a lot of stuff going on right now with this agenda. People are claiming to be followers of Christ, and this is what they're doing. They're saying if you're a white Calvinist, you are a white nationalist because it's never condemned. Therefore, you're in the wrong. Beth Moore. There's people that are using there's simply no gospel grounds for defending white supremacy. Clearly there's not. Why make a statement like that? For you to make a statement like that, there's got to be somebody doing it, right? Why not say who it is? Pretty simple. It would really just solve a lot of problems, to be honest. If these people would just come out and say, hey, listen, so-and-so is using the gospel to defend their white supremacy. Call them out. Plain and simple. Then that person could be confronted. They could be taught. They could be rebuked. Plain and simple. Why not do that? It's just not happening. Again, I'm not saying that this doesn't happen anywhere in the world. But you can't be a solid follower of Christ. You can't understand the gospel message and be racist. You can't. You just absolutely can't do it. It blows my mind. And she says, too, there's simply no gospel grounds for defending white supremacy. None. This isn't theological rocket science. Like, yeah, no kidding. It's not. Like, clearly it's not theological rocket science that the gospel prevents you from being a racist. Like, why even say that? And then this stuff is just getting worse, man. It really is. I hate to see it happen so much. I really do. Because again, there's so many people that are buying into this, and if you want to have conversations about unity and stuff like that, preach the gospel. Preach the gospel about Christ crucified and how he purchased our redemption, and there's no longer this wall between people. There's no need for dissension. There's no need for any of that stuff, because what Christ did on the cross was sufficient enough to abolish that. Racism is a sin. Therefore, he paid for that on the cross. There's not some sort of social justice agenda that you've got to promote. Christ crucified is what took care of it. Let's get back to preaching that. Let's handle that. Let's do that. Listen, I only wanted to talk about this one time. I'll have private conversations with you and stuff like that. I really don't plan on doing like a series and stuff like that unless, something major comes up. But the reason why I brought this up to you tonight is because I want you to be aware as to what's happening. Because if you get involved with a conversation, I don't want you to be sideswiped by this. Like, this stuff's actually happening. Like, this is going on constantly, okay? I want you to be aware of it. And I want you to know what people are saying in the name of Christ about other believers. I just simply want you guys to be aware of that stuff. So that's why I brought this up tonight. That's why I decided that we needed to talk about this tonight, because, again, there's just so much of it. It's just happening so much. So listen, if you want to know more, send me a message. I'll be happy to counsel and give advice and encouragement and whatever questions I can answer and stuff like that. Send me a message. I'd love to chat about it. I'd love to give you some more information and we can sort things out and stuff like that. And hey, listen, if you listen to Beth Moore and you're now upset because I said you shouldn't listen to Beth Moore, message me. I'll be happy to provide you with some resources as to why you shouldn't listen to Beth Moore or read her stuff or anything like that. Again, I gotta talk about this stuff. It's going on. I am obligated to Christ to I report to him. Like, I've got to take care of his word. And when people aren't doing that and they do it on a public platform, I feel that people need to be aware of it. So that's why we're doing that. So, and if you want to know somebody who's way more intelligent than me, if you want to hear their take on all this stuff, watch The Dividing Line from today, from May 1st. Dr. White, I think it was at 3 o'clock Eastern. He spoke about this stuff as well. He is very knowledgeable in it. Go listen to his show. You'll get some more information about that if you want a different perspective, if you want, a more intelligent perspective. But add him to your rotation. Listen to Dr. White all the time. He is truly an amazing man of God, and I've learned a lot from him. So that's all I've got for tonight for the show. Make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube, youtube.com/Theology Nights, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you're at, and then follow us on Facebook, facebook.com/Theology Nights. We will be back Tuesday. Well, you know what? Actually, no, we won't. Next week's Basics Conference. Oh my gosh, I just now remembered this. Next week is Basics Conference. Tuesday is our late day, so I don't get home till late, so there won't be a show on Tuesday. I'll have to figure out my schedule next week because we're traveling the following weekend too. We'll be there. We'll be there sometime. I don't know exactly when. I'll keep you guys posted, but just look for the live show sometime next week. And then, like I said, make sure you subscribe on your favorite podcast app because we've got some new podcasts coming up that I'd love for you guys to be a part of. Have a wonderful day, guys. See you soon. Thanks.